When he says it, it's cool. When Tilly, Michael, or Spock said it in Discovery, it was horrible.
Get us out of here. We can't seem to warp. Hey, thanks for the assist.
This is the Elysian Kingdom. This is episode 8 of Strange New World Season 1. I've heard the term Elysian, Elysium, Elysia maybe 1,000 times in sci-fi, and probably a few times in Star Trek as well. So the name didn't really excite me. Elysium, it calls to mind paradise, heaven, things like that. And I have to wonder, would it have been better to come up with an original name for this kingdom? This episode is a roller coaster. The beat-by-beat plot moments don't really matter so much in this episode. This is very much a turn your brain off, as they say, episode, where we're just enjoying the performances. And I do believe we're using the entire main cast in this episode, so you won't be missing out on anybody. Everybody is just giving a performance, in most cases different than their regular performance. Some characters excluded. This is like the episode Masks from TNG. Maybe a little bit of The Inner Light. A little bit of what I believe was called Daedalus, an episode from Enterprise. And it's coming together into a soup of an episode that, not wholly original, but is a platform to develop interesting scenes, interesting performances. At times it's funny, at times it's cathartic, but through and through, it's overall decent. Like I said before, this is a plot that you don't really have to think too hard about, really. It's more about the emotional points that we hit, okay? So it's going to make this an interesting review, I believe. We're not really going to be going through every single little plot detail, because it's mostly tensionless and made up, okay? Literally made up. This episode is a storybook that Dr. Mbenga was reading to his daughter, who we know he's keeping in the transport buffer, whatever that means. And she wants it to go a certain way. They go to a nebula, magic space stuff happens as it does in Star Trek, and they end up in the book. How many times have you seen this, right? Oh, we end up in the TV show we were watching. We end up in this idea we had. We're in our own fantasy. You know, in a historical context, this is like the king becoming the jester and the jester becoming the king. Just for one day, let's all do the opposite. You know, we do the opposite of what we normally do. We throw caution to the wind, and hopefully we learn some new truths about each other that we couldn't otherwise say. Okay? This is the Elysian Kingdom. Star Trek Strange New World, Season 1, Episode 8. Let's see what's going on, shall we? We're in a place called the Dionysian Nebula. This is after our intro segment with Dr. Mbenga reading the story that this episode is based on to his daughter. We have that scene in there just to remind you. We're getting you up to speed with the idea that his daughter is sick and she needs to be free of her illness, okay? And she's reading this storybook with her father, Dr. Mbenga, about King Ridley and how he's in a magical fantasy setting, and there's a thing called a Mercury Stone. Keep that in mind. So, we're setting the foundation, but we're in the Dionysian Nebula, and Pike remarks, "Isn't this great, Spock? Just being able to do science. You know, just out here doing our job." And I have to concur with Pike. I would like it if we could just do our job and just do some science and just go for a 9-to-5 snoozer, baby. Oftentimes that's not how it works out, and oftentimes people just bite it, especially if you're wearing my color. I just get stampled by something. I get burned, get my head cut off, I get squished, I get sent to an alternate dimension. all kinds of crazy stuff. But I'm still here now, so guess I'm lucky. That's good. In keeping with things going wrong, just as soon as you think they're not going to go wrong, Dr. Mbenga arrives on the bridge at the request of Captain Pike, who, having discovered that the ship is now forced stationary, the warp core seems to be not giving us the warp drive that we need. We try to activate the impulse drive. It fails. Internal inertial dampeners fail at that moment. Or we've experienced something that overrides the internal inertial dampener, overpowers it. Ortegas falls and hits her head. So that's why Dr. Mbenga is coming to the bridge. Ortegas needs medical assistance. Dr. Mbenga arrives on the bridge, and everyone is immediately dressed up like a character from this book he was reading, right? The Elysian Kingdom. Performances vary from boring and not important to fantastic and a guilty pleasure. You'll note that the arrival of the Elysian Kingdom setting has fixed Pike's hair. His hair is no longer straight up, it is combed down. You might think it looks stupid. I thought it was an improvement, but don't take it from me as someone who doesn't have hair to comb down. But if you have hair, what do you think? Do you think this hair is better or worse? As someone who has hair, in the comments. If you don't have hair, just tell me in the comments if you don't have hair. But if you do, you can tell me what you think. So you can just delete my opinion until I get hair enhancement therapy, which I hear the Starfleet is developing as we speak. Wow, the magic of science, right? So the plot plays out like it would in the book, right? Pike is Chamberlain Roth. It's going to feel like I'm going to read off a cast of characters like we haven't seen them before, right? I'm introducing you to our characters in Strange New Worlds for this episode. Pike is Roth. Ortegas is Adia. Una is Zymira, I believe. Hemmer is Castor. Castor, I believe. He's a magician / wizard. His brother is Pollux. Get it? Castor and Pollux. I believe there's a stars called Castor and Pollux, although I've never been there. And I don't know what they're named after. Probably something in ancient Earth history that I'm not totally aware of. If you know and you caught that, that's great. But the brothers are Castor and Pollux. Pollux being the other wizard, which is Hemmer's brother. Uhura is the villain, Queen Nev. Noonien-singh is Talia, who is a princess that's allied with King Ridley. And that about wraps it up, I believe. I'm trying to think. I know we're using the whole cast, and I feel like I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing? Ah, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is our plan. And our plan is to get the Mercury Stone from Ridley. That is, if we're the villain. Queen Nev wants the Mercury Stone, right? In the story, King Ridley has the Mercury Stone. It's a magical device of some sort that protects him and comforts him. But at some point in the story, he needs to give it up to save, in the book, Princess Talia. But in the show, he has to give it up to save the crew, I believe. It's a little bit nebulous, if you'll pardon the pun. Treachery abounds. Action scenes here and there. Okay. What we find out, basically, is that Hemmer is not affected by the disturbance that has caused the book to become reality. Okay. Hemmer is telepathic, right? So we deduce, with Hemmer's help, that while Hemmer is unaffected by it, so is Dr. Mbenga. The nebula itself contains a thing called a Boltzmann brain, which, according to Hemmer, is a theoretical idea involving the spontaneous arrival of consciousness from disparate particles in space. Okay. Now, nothing in the universe is truly spontaneous. True spontaneity, in my view, has yet to occur, but given that, the consciousness has taken control of the Enterprise. Why? Well, we'll find that out in a moment. There's many funny scenes. We're really chewing the scenery, and may I add, the scenery is pretty cool. The inside of the Enterprise is decked out like it's some kind of castle, and then there's like plants everywhere, reminding me of a Star Trek book I read. I once read a book from my Star Trek novels where they went on a Romulan ship, and there was plants everywhere in this guy's room, and he was like a botanist or something. And there was, and this scene just took me right back into that book. I'm gonna go look up what it is, and then I'll edit it into this video to show you that book. If you wanted to read it, I really enjoyed it, but this is not a review for that book. This is a review for the Elysian Kingdom. So let's get back on track. Many scenes that I always enjoy from like First Contact style episodes, or episodes where we're trying to hide our identity. I like Star Trek when we're the aliens. I always think that's really cool. We need to hide. We need to blur things with the mist of magical terms to keep people from catching on that we don't belong there. So our medical tricorder, or scanner, is a magical device, right? And so on and so forth. What one person sees as magic will actually reveal itself to be science, because any sufficiently advanced scientific principle or technology is indistinguishable from magic from the untrained eye. You probably heard this before, and it's at full play in this episode. We have to get Queen Nev off our trail. We're, as in the book, we are betrayed by Chamberlain Roth, who was played by Pike, and Pollux sells us out to Queen Nev, even though Hemmer is his brother, Castor is his brother. So what's curious about this is that if Dr. Mbenga knows the story, how does he allow himself to be caught by Chamberlain Roth? Did he not know immediately that Pollux was going to betray Hemmer? If you know the plot, how can you get caught? Much like Pike, he knows his future. How can he possibly lose? Knowing the future is a good thing. It doesn't cause you, especially in Mbenga's case, but in Pike's case, it shouldn't cause you immense psychological trauma if you know the future and can prevent it. Why can't we... I'm sorry to make this into a diatribe about the whole season, but why can't Pike, for example, not have his future happen that way? Like, does anybody know? Speaking of that, his plotline is completed in the TOS episode Menagerie. Not to spoil it, but this episode also dips into the menagerie as well, and you'll learn that by the end. Okay. Hemmer discovers that Rukia, right, is in the transporter. Okay. And Mbenga tells him, and they deduce that this nebula, because Rukia was in the transporter, her mind was in the transporter, the being in this nebula actually can read her mind, suck her out of the transporter, and then have her play out the story of that book with the crew as her pawns. Devious, scary. What happens to somebody when they actually get killed? Because there's sword fighting in this episode. Adia, or Tegas, is a knight of some sort and goes toe-to-toe with some people, and I'm wondering the entire time is, what happens if they get their head cut off? What if you die in the game, do you die in real life? One of the big questions underlying this episode that doesn't seem to get answered, and wraps up neatly at the end with a nice bow on top without explaining it. And we'll get into why I said that a little bit later. So they have to find Rukia. Where's the one place she wanted to go? Rukia said she wanted to tour the ship before she went back in the transporter last time, and she wanted to see Mbenga's quarters. I know. We'll go to Mbenga's quarters. That's where Rukia would go if she was free to go anywhere she wanted. We're missing something. We named our cast, but who's the Mercury Stone? Well, Rukia is the Mercury Stone. You could have probably guessed this immediately when this episode started. The Mercury Stone is something that's very near and dear to Ridley. Ridley being Dr. Mbenga. What's most dear to him? Rukia. Right? Many would say the ship should be most dear to him, because we don't have families on ships yet in Starfleet. We're not that advanced yet. Playing into the idea of the moral arc of this episode, okay? The theme of this episode, really at the end of the day, is compromising, right? In the story, Ridley has to give up the Mercury Stone, okay? Rukia says, why can't we have both? When I'm not sick anymore and I get out of this transporter, I want to have my own story and the way I want it to. Like, I want Adia and Zymira to team up. Right? That's what initially gives Mbenga the clue that Rukia is in control, because in the plot of this episode, Zymira, Una, and Ortegas, they know each other, right? The Huntress and Sir Adia. But they don't know each other in the book. And it was Rukia's idea that they team up. Ah, I see. Rukia is controlling things here. Life is a game of compromises, You can't have everything because time is limited, right? You think you can have it this way, and you can have this other thing, but then you find out that they're opposed. They're diametrically opposed. They're at odds with each other. We have so much time. What do we spend it on, right? At the end of the day, time is the ultimate currency, right, that we have. Once you run out of time, you can't get it back, and you can't live forever, yet. Although Dr. Mbenga would disagree. He's trying to get his daughter to live forever by keeping her in the transporter. I don't want to retread old ground on that. I already discussed it in an earlier episode, what I think about her being the transporter, so I'll leave it alone. At the end of the day, we have an episode that is about sacrificing one option for another. Making the hard decision. Do I want to save my daughter? Or do I want her to stay with me and the crew, We can let my daughter go, healing her, or she can stay home and be sick. Now, how you feel about this probably depends on how much you trust this bizarre alien entity. We get into Mbenga's quarters. Hemmer is telepathic and agrees to re-link up with the Nebula's consciousness and ask her what's going on. The Nebula says basically, listen, this child is trapped in your ship. She's alone like I am. I'm trapped out here. I transported her consciousness out of the transporter, made the story real for her, and let her play this game with you guys, okay? Not elaborating on any real danger that may have taken place. I got the impression from the tone of the episode that the stakes actually weren't that high. There wasn't a lot of tension. My brain had the feeling that we weren't in any real danger, but Dr. Mbenga seems to think that they're in danger, and he asks the Nebula consciousness, can you please let her crew go? Well, the Nebula says, if I let you go, your daughter will die. She'll be sick, right? She'll be sick forever. When you exist inside the Nebula, you're not sick, and this is where the episode takes a turn for the weird. Would you trust this Nebula to steal your daughter and take her into some extra-dimensional plane where she won't be sick and you'll never see her, but she'll be able to live however she wants? Spoilers for TOS. In the episode Menagerie, Pike goes back with the Telosians to be free of his physical illness, to live out a fantasy world, okay? That's exactly what goes on here. I said spoilers for TOS, you should have turned it off. I thought you should have turned off the review at that point and watched that episode. You were warned, okay? because it's a cool episode, and it also spoils Pike's character arc, right? So if you haven't watched TOS, I just spoiled his character arc for you. Hopefully you turn this review off, but if you didn't, this episode reflects the menagerie, you see. That's why I brought it up earlier in the review. This episode is like Masks, where we're playing out a fantasy tale that's not real, and we're playing the characters. I actually like that episode of TNG. A lot of people don't. It's like the episode, I think it was called Daedalus and Enterprise, where the inventor of the transporter is trying to get his son back after a transporter accident beamed him into all of space. See, we're doing the reverse now. We're beaming our daughter out into space to save her. It's a little bit like the Inner Light with how it plays with time. In the TNG episode Inner Light, we see a character play through an entire lifetime in a minute. At the end of this episode, Mbenga lets his daughter go. He lets her make the decision. Can, what is she, 10? Not even 10? Can you let a girl that young make that kind of decision? And at the behest of an alien force we've never seen before? That's going to be your question, right? I'll leave that one with you. That's really the big sticking point in this episode. Does that make sense? What do you think I think? You think what you think, and you think what I probably think, and you compare them. In the comments, of course, if you want to. You see, his daughter comes back at the last moment as an adult, revealing that time passed differently in the nebula. So he gets the answer to his question by seeing his daughter come back as an adult, which opposes the theme of the episode. The episode is about compromises, right? It's about the mystery of the road not taken, okay? So we can save our daughter and let her go, or we can keep her and have her be sick, but possibly heal her later. Okay, if you let her go, the negative consequence of that should be that you don't know what happened. Like, the mystery is what's enlightening about it. Pondering the mystery is what gives you emotional catharsis, okay? On Dr. Mbenga's half. And if you're writing a plot like this, you wouldn't have the plot answer itself like that. Really, the daughter should have left, and then Mbenga would never know what happened, right? That's how you would end this episode. But I think they were afraid that Mbenga would look crazy for letting his daughter go, so they tried to resolve it immediately by saying, oh, no, wait. In a rewrite, they wrote in a scene where his adult daughter comes back, revealing that, 20 years have gone by in the nebula in a second. So that way he knows everything worked out. Don't worry, guys. His daughter made it. Because we're worried about what kids will think about this episode. I understand it's dumb to let a child decide to diffuse their corporeal flesh into the mind space of an alien conscious nebula. That sounds ridiculous, and you shouldn't write it that way. But then they said, oh, well, how do we fix it? Well, his daughter can come back. Well, no, you can't. You don't get to write the episode that way. The episode gets worse right at the last moment when you realize that it took away the mystery that we should have been allowed to have, even at Mbenga's expense. I know it makes Mbenga look crazy, but on the same token, it gives us something to chew on. But now we've so neatly resolved the problem with his daughter that it's just deleted now. This is the fastest way to delete a character I've ever seen, right? We literally transport them out into space and then have them come back at the last moment saying everything was okay. Think about that. Think about how efficiently this episode gets rid of Mbenga's daughter. Nobody liked Mbenga's daughter being in the transporter. It contravenes what we knew about how transporters work. It contravenes the timeline of Star Trek in numerous ways. I never liked it. I'm not going to harp on it anymore. But isn't it interesting that this episode resolved a problem that I had? How can I complain about that? You might say, well, it's fixing a problem that it never should have had to begin with. true. And then I could say, well, isn't that a positive thing? And then you could say, well, not really. It's just bringing us back to zero. It's bringing us back to where neutral should be, right? We had a negative, now we're back to neutral. I feel tonally and emotionally that we're back to a little bit positive. I like that we resolved the issue with his daughter, if it is a bit mysterious and weird. I like that we brought back Hammer, a great character of mine, one of my favorite characters. Hammer has numerous great scenes in this episode. Hammer kills it in this episode. Most good scenes in this episode belong to Hammer. Hammer, like I said before, he's playing around with science and calling it magic. And when he says, science prevails, or this is science, this is a new magic called science, when he says it, it's cool. When Tilly, Michael, or Spock said it in Discovery, it was horrible. Because what they said in earnest, Hammer said with a wink wink. Like he said it with this drop of irony and sarcasm that I just thought made it so cute. This episode is worth it just for a few scenes with Hammer. At one point, he beams people away that are threatening him by saying he's sending them to the event horizon, and he goes, "Ooh, abracadabra! I'm going to use the power of my wizard powers, abracadabra!" Boop, and he presses a button on his communicator that he had synced up with the transporter to transport them into the cargo bay. Very cute, very fun, very fresh. I think just tonally. After the last episode, the Serene Squall was very serious. Serious when it wanted to be, stupid every other time. This episode was fun, stupid, and confusing good at moments, which tonally is a shift away from the Serene Squall, an episode that I did not love that much. This episode, at the very end, we ended on a note of a weird neutral note of confusion. You'll note every character in this episode didn't know what happened in the missing 5 hours, okay? Where they went through the storybook of the Elysian Kingdom. Only Mbenga knows, and not even telepathic Hammer knows. You've seen this multiple times in Star Trek. Something happens, and in order to resolve hanger-on story problems, we make it so only one character remembers it, or no characters remember it. That way we don't have to write later that this character remembers this thing happening, and it confuses their overall character arc. We just give everyone amnesia. Don't worry about it, guys. We all got amnesia. Except for Mbenga. And I was waiting for it at the moment, at the end of the episode, for Mbenga to say his daughter's gone. But I don't know, did I not catch it? At the end of the episode, can we see that his daughter is physically gone? I figured she was gone to a place where her illness can't kill her. And then at the end of the episode, I was waiting for him to say that, oh yeah, my daughter's gone. And Una was just going to be like, wait a minute, your daughter's gone? Where'd she go? And Mbenga should have just been like, well, I can't tell you, really. I don't know what happened myself. But it had to do with the missing 5 hours. Can you imagine telling that? Una knows about his daughter, presumably the captain. We have a mysterious 5 hours of lost time, like we were abducted by a UFO or something. And now his daughter's physically gone. They know we just lost someone on the ship, which we made our responsibility in an earlier episode. Why? And Dr. Mbenga just gets away with it? He's like a suspect in his daughter's murder or something. Think of it from their point of view. Think of it as if you're Pike. 5 hours went by, and somebody's missing. That's what happened in this episode. If you think about it logically. But, like I said before, this is an episode where you gotta kind of turn your brain off. Turn your brain off, allow the episode to resolve some problems, try to have fun along the way, enjoy the character performances, where they really get to let loose. Noonien-singh is singing. We get to see her dog. Spock has long hair and is playing some kind of a wizard character, and he's devious and evil. It's fun stuff. It's okay television, but the logical issues and the questions are bubbling below the surface, I'm sad to say. So that about does it for our plot. I hope that wasn't too confusing. It was hard to explain because it was hard for me to remember because most of the plot didn't really matter because our characters were aware of the plot. Like when you're in a play, you're not worrying so much about the plot around you. You're just worrying about your part. Which is to say, in this episode, Mbenga was just trying to save his daughter, and he kind of did. You'll have to really watch this one for yourself and decide if he really saved her, or if this is some kind of elaborate ploy to steal his daughter by an alien presence. Holy crap. We just met pirates last episode, so space isn't that safe. But as they say, space is the place. That doesn't make any goddamn sense, but I just said it because it rhymed. Excuse me. Musically, this episode was very fun. It played with the motifs of the fantasy setting. It had a medieval like motif to the way the music was done. It sounded ancient, and it sounded mysterious and ethereal. And then the Star Trek theme, the motif of Star Trek, worms its way into the plot that the music is setting up in your mind, where you think, oh, this is medieval fantasy. Something happens where somebody uses a transporter and pretends it's magic, and then you can hear the Star Trek theme seamlessly work into the adventure of the music. Like the trail the music is taking you on takes a weird scientific turn, and you can hear the Star Trek theme pop in. It's very interesting. It's very cool. It never gets distracting, but if you're listening for it, you'll notice it, and it may make you feel happy feelings in your brain that could give you dopamine. And dopamine is good. I like to have the dopamines in my brain. Hopefully you do too, because it makes you happy. Really, we're just meat puppets who like chemicals in their brain to go off, and they send chemicals into our frontal cortex that makes us behave in a way that gives us more dopamine, right? That's what Star Trek does for me. At least it used to. So, philosophically, morally, like I said before, to close off, this is an episode about compromises. You can't have everything your way. But the writers wanted to have everything their way, so they brought back Mbenga's daughter at the last second to say, "Don't worry, Mbenga, I was fine, I'm okay." It's like you wrote it and didn't learn your own lesson. You know what I mean? Like, you know, my daughter is the Mercury Stone. King Ridley needs to let go of the Mercury Stone to save his kingdom, supposedly. The Mercury Stone gives him comfort. His daughter gives him comfort. We have to let her go. We save the crew. We get over the nebula. My daughter's gone. But now she comes back. At the last second. As an adult. I missed her entire life. Hey, but at least she was okay and she wasn't sick. I guess we can have it both ways. I guess the episode was wrong. I guess we can have things both ways, right? Yeah. Overall, a fun episode. I liked it more than the last one. I would say this is probably in the upper half of the episodes of this season. There's been some stinkers. There's been Ghost of Valyria, which was bad. There was I don't like Children of the Comet very much. This one is above those. It's better than the last one. All said, I'm going to have to go ahead and give this one a 6. Okay, par for the course for this season. All of our episodes are just middling. This episode edges it out into the 6 category because it resolves more problems than it introduces, if you really think about it. Again, no Strange New Worlds episode is really going to get that high of a score, if we're being honest with ourselves, because we're shamelessly stealing TOS stuff to put our own coat of paint on it, and then on top of that, we break with canon and we interrupt the timeline in a weird way, okay? You need to understand when you're making a prequel that you have a time machine, okay? You are a writer. I'm going back in time. I have a time machine, and I'm messing with people's lives. You see, people vicariously live through these characters in TOS. way back when. They shared in the achievements with Captain Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov. Their achievements were our achievements. The worst thing you can do, the cardinal sin of the prequel, is to retroactively steal the achievements of someone and give it to someone who existed before them. It feels like that's what you do when you have Pike just putting on a cheap Kirk impression that comes off feeling fake and forced, okay? Like, this episode, at the beginning it has it, but we get to see, honestly, a slightly more fun Pike later when he goes into the Elysian Kingdom mode and he becomes Chamberlain Roth. And I had fun watching him play a sniveling idiot who is trying to get out of combat and is actually willing to sell out his king to his enemy for personal gain. I thought it was fun, and as I thought most of the performances were fun. Okay, you see Pike in normal Pike is just, let's take a character, slather on so much charisma, and then call it a day, right? It doesn't have the angry edge of authority and decisiveness that Kirk had, right? It's a cartoon version of Kirk. It's what you would think Kirk was if you had learned about Kirk through just osmosis, having information seep into your brain. If you spent an hour on the internet in 2020's Earth, that's what you might think. Oh, let's design Pike so he's like Kirk. Oh, well, he's just kind of this larger-than-life guy who's really charismatic and really overly cool, right? He's the most interesting man in the world. And he says things like, oh, hey, I'm buying drinks. Watch this episode. There's some point where Pike says, like, all right, let's get out of here. Drinks are on me. This is the closest Pike has ever come to making me cringe at the beginning of this episode. Lay it off a little bit. Lay off the charisma a little bit. He's starting to feel like a psychopath who is inventing a personality that he thinks people want to see instead of his actual self. It's getting creepy. But that's beside the point. I know I'm rambling. This was Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 8, Elysian Kingdom. What we had was an episode that face value fun, but underneath there's a sickening soup of logical questions that, if we're honest with ourselves, undergird the entirety of Strange New Worlds so far. Can you accept Strange New Worlds? Can you accept it as its own timeline? Can you accept what you're seeing on screen? Can you accept it at face value? If you can enjoy this perfectly, that's fantastic. I'm just going ho-hum on it, which is why I gave it a 6 earlier. I'm Lieutenant Mark, and I'm going to see you next week.